Well, the Dodgers get Ohtani, but the Braves get David Fletcher. We'll talk about all of those moves happening over the weekend on today's bonus episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of a Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Also, make sure you check out my written work over at BravesToday.com. Make sure you follow the podcast on social media at LockedOn_Braves. Send in any questions, comments, or feedback that you have for the podcast. Always enjoy hearing from you. And I do a lot of these episodes live during the off season, so make sure that you look out for that as well. We got a lot of people in here: Argenis, Shane, Realistic, Neil, Matt, Ryan, Golden Child, Glenn Turner. Thank you so much for jumping in here live, especially on the weekend. Dave in here. I'm so excited to be talking about this podcast, and I'm so excited to have the Shohei Ohtani news out of the way. Didn't come to the Braves. Maybe some of you still thought there was a chance of that happening, but you know, the Braves do make some moves. We'll talk about the David Fletcher move, what that means for the Braves. And now, hopefully, we're going to see some moves start happening. We're going to see things really pick up here with the Ohtani news out of the way. But thank you so much for joining me here again. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. If you're new, hit that thumbs up button on this video if you would help support the show. Let's jump into the news, though. On Saturday, I was getting ready. I was going to fire up a bonus episode just to talk about the David Fletcher, Max Stassi move and trade that happened on Friday night. But then, while I was prepping for that, we got the move for the Dodgers. And as Neil White says, no way the Braves would ever spend $700 million on one player. But that's what the Dodgers have done. They have spent $700 million on Shohei Ohtani over 10 years. That is just an insane amount of money to think about. $70 million a year. No opt-outs in that deal either. I've said this before when we've talked about Ohtani, and even at the Braves did have some sort of interest. I said, if you're going to sign him for this mega deal, which you knew he's going to get, I think I projected on Friday's mailbag episode, or rather we did it on Thursday. I projected 10 years, $450 million. So I had the years right, but man, I did not think somebody would go to this level on Ohtani with the injuries. And again, I've been saying all along with Ohtani, if you are going to hand him this kind of money, you better be certain that he can pitch again and that he can pitch at a high level. You're giving him $700 million. You're expecting him to be the two-way MVP for, at least half of this contract. I would think. This is just an absurd amount of money. Look, you're going to make that money back, and we discussed that part of it too. Look, had he come to the Braves, I would have understood it, because I think you can make some of that money back, if not all of it, just based on merchandise and everything. So again, I get it why you would spend that much money. Everything that happened on Friday with all the news of him going to Toronto and just the way that played out, it was a lot of fun. If you're a Blue Jays fan, I am sorry, because you thought you had Ohtani coming your way, and that was not the case. And he goes to the Dodgers for $700 million. Argenis talking about Freed says LA just committed their savings on Ohtani, but you'll get more rings here. That's an aspect of this deal I haven't thought about. I mean, sure, the Dodgers have all the money in the world. They can still spend on other players, but are they going to be willing to hand out a $175 million contract to a 30-year-old lefty next year and Max Fried, which is where a lot of people think Max Fried could go? But does this move for Ohtani, does that hurt their chances at all at signing somebody like a Max Fried? I don't know that it does. Again, the Dodgers' pockets are pretty deep, and they can probably cover it, but I hadn't thought about that aspect of it, with this maybe hurting their chances of getting Max Fried next offseason, assuming, they would have been one of his biggest suitors. So maybe that helps the Braves just a little bit, but I doubt it has too much effect on that part of it. It's just an insane amount of money. I mean, again, I thought he might get $500 million. My guess that I had on the Mailbag podcast of $450 million, I thought that was being conservative. I still thought he probably would get $500 million, but $700 million. He better be a front of the rotation pitcher. He better come back healthy. That arm better be in good shape, because otherwise you're paying for a really good DH and an MVP level DH. But man, you're paying $700 million. You're expecting that shoulder, or that elbow rather, to be fine, and for him to come back and be a front of the rotation pitcher. And look, for the sake of baseball, I hope that's the case, because a good Ohtani is certainly good for baseball, I believe. That's just a huge risk. One the Braves weren't willing to take. I don't think they were ever going to take it. Like I talked about, the only way I saw the Braves making any type of deal with Ohtani if he was going to take either a short-term deal or a deal with some opt-outs. But there are no opt-outs in this deal, nor should they be from Ohtani's side, because he's getting a guaranteed $700 million. It's just insane to say and think about. I mean, yeah, as mainly Joe is saying, 10 for 700 is insane. That's the only word to use when describing this deal. So again, what dynamic does it change for the Braves in the National League? Right now, you go over to our friends at FanDuel. I'll mention it again here in a second and talk some more about them. But the Dodgers are the favorites now to win the World Series. So they have them jumping the Braves. I think that's probably a little bit of an overreaction. I still think there's some moves the Dodgers need to make in their rotation. You're counting on a healthy Walker Buehler. They do have some really young, good pitchers like a Bobby Miller coming up, and some other arms that they have. But I still think there's some questions about their rotation. You look at in 2024, Ohtani's just going to be a hitter. He's just going to be a DH. Dodgers had a really good one last year in JD Martinez. I'm not trying to say JD Martinez is on Ohtani's level, but 33 home runs, 103 RBI last year is what JD Martinez produced. So for 2024, at least, I don't see it as a widely significant upgrade. Obviously, Ohtani's an MVP. He's one of the best hitters in baseball. It's still going to be a really good Dodgers lineup, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. And I think the Braves are still going to have a really good lineup, and it's probably going to come down to the pitching. And hopefully that's where things go next. With the Ohtani signing, now hopefully we see the offense, or the offseason, really get rolling. We see some of these other starting pitchers go, like a Yamamoto, a Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery, those guys, and maybe the trade market picks up a little bit with guys like Corbin Burns, Tyler Glasnow, Dylan Cease. So that's another reason I'm just really excited to have this Ohtani news out of the way. It was fun. The last couple of days have been really fun trying to speculate where he was going, following Reddit threads to see where he's been traveling and what team he might be signing with. But it is over. And like we all thought to begin with, he's going to the Dodgers. Nathan Cate says Dodgers can have him. I like where the Braves are and are headed. And I agree with that. I wish you would have gone to the Blue Jays. I wish you would have gone, to somebody outside of the National League. I wish you would have gone back to the Angels. Certainly would rather that than going to one of the Braves' main competitors in the National League. But still think the Braves are in a great position with where they are. And this doesn't really change much in that respect for me. All right. But Braves did some dealing on Friday night. They make a trade as well. Some more bad contracts being swapped around, but this time maybe somebody that could be a little bit more useful in David Fletcher. We'll discuss that trade here next. Get in on the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. You've been thinking about joining FanDuel. There's no better time to get in on the action than right now. You got NFL, you got college football going on, the bowl games leading up to the college football playoff, NHL, NBA, in-season tournaments happening right now. You got so much action sports-wise out there, except for baseball, which is all I really care about. But I know some of you actually watch other sports, so there's a ton going on for you. And the app is so easy to use. Spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. And again, I talked about it. You want to get in on the World Series action? Hey, now your Braves aren't favored, so you want to take advantage of a market that's probably overreacting to the Ohtani news. The Dodgers are now the favorite at plus 500, according to FanDuel, with the Braves behind them at plus 650. So again, you want to throw some there on the Braves now that they're not the favorite. You can go over to FanDuel and do that. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Also visit FanDuel.com/PlaySafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Want to remind you that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, getting into the news from Friday night, which I thought was what was going to carry this podcast until the Ohtani news broke. And that is the Braves offloading a bad contract in Evan White, and then also getting some bad contracts back in David Fletcher and Max Stassi. But again, I think this one's going to be a little bit more beneficial for the Braves. They trade Evan White and Thomas Taylor rather, for David Fletcher and Max Stassi from the Angels. This is clearly a money swap here for both teams. Was talking to the guys at Locked On Angels. Go ahead and check them out. You want to hear their side of this trade, and they're both just really good. They're one of the best out there that do it. Really great brother tandem that do that podcast together, and it's a really fun podcast to listen to. This, for them, was more to get out from money in 2024. While the money in total is pretty even on both sides, this does help the Angels more in 2024. Get under the luxury tax, kind of cut some of their payroll. So that seemed to be kind of the motivation for them. I doubt they're going to do anything with Evan White. And, Thomas is just, a filler type of arm in the bullpen. So again, I think that's the motivation from the Angels side of things. For the Braves, this was a move to get David Fletcher and to get somebody for your bench utility role. And David Fletcher is nice. He's going to be a nice piece. He's somebody that, if Arcia goes down, Albies goes down, you can put him in there, and he has a lot of starting experience. He's not necessarily going to kill you. He's going to bat ninth in your lineup. He's going to put the ball in play, and he's going to play solid defense. That's just who he is. And I think that's a solid move in that regard. Now, you are paying him $6 million this year and $6.5 million next year to be, your utility infielder on the bench. You're paying him more than you're paying Orlando Arcia. You're paying him more than you would have paid Nicky Lopez, but you got to keep in mind that this whole domino effect scenario started with the fact that the Braves really wanted to get Kelenic. And because they wanted to get Kelenic, they got stuck with some bad contracts. And now AA is trying to figure out a way to move these contracts around, but yet still get something useful. And so that's where you land on David Fletcher. He's played second, short, third base. He's even played some left field in his career going back to 2019. So in a pinch, you could stick him out there. Like I said, he's somebody, he doesn't strike out. A strikeout rate under 10% in his career. So he puts the ball in play. Not a lot of impact when he does that. But again, you needed somebody to come off the bench to put the ball in play for you. He certainly can do that. And as far as defense, great range. He's a great fielder. Not a good arm. You put him at second base, he might be a Gold Glove level player. Shortstop, again, still really good range, makes some great stops, but just not a strong enough arm really for the left side of the diamond. But again, could fill in there if needed and play some solid defense for you. As far as Max Stassi goes, they've already reported he's likely going to be traded. Teams are always looking for catchers. You may have to eat some money in a deal where you're trying to trade Stassi, just like they did with Marco Gonzalez. They traded him and gave some money to the Pirates in that deal. You may have to do that with Stassi, but there's likely going to be a team out there that is going to take a chance on Stassi just because they need some catching depth, and there's just not a surplus of that available right now. The Braves are content with Murphy and d'Arnaud. He's not going to be replacing either one of them, but he's likely going to get flipped here sometime soon as well. So that's the deal. Again, I think this is just trying to shift around some bad contracts and get something useful. And I think they got that in David Fletcher. So I guess another part of this too is worth discussing, as I see Evan Connor talking about a trade package with Vaughn Grissom included. It does seem more and more like the Braves just aren't willing to give Vaughn Grissom any type of opportunity, because you go and you trade Kelenic, and yeah, maybe there's talks of it being a platoon situation, but you're going to have Vaughn Grissom be on the short side of a platoon situation. And so then there's the idea of, okay, well, maybe you do that, and then maybe you fill in Vaughn Grissom at shortstop every now and then to give Arcia a break, and you find a way to get him in the lineup 3 or 4 times a week. And then you go and get a guy in David Fletcher, and who's better defensively, and he's going to fill that role as, if there was going to be a defensive replacement or something, I think David Fletcher does fill that role. So it keeps looking more and more likely that the Braves are going to trade Vaughn Grissom at some point, or just at the very least, they don't see a future with him in this team. I hate that. I've said all along, I think Vaughn Grissom has a very good role if used correctly. If you get him comfortable in left field and you use him in that super utility role, because the bat is going to play. As AJ Evans says, I'm scared of who the Braves trade Vaughn for. And that is my biggest worry. If you just trade Vaughn Grissom because you don't think he has a role on this team, and you trade him away for nothing. You trade him away for a Joe Jimenez, which Joe Jimenez ended up being good, but you gave away the best prospect. And look, I wasn't very high on Justin Henry Malloy, but you give up the best prospect in the system at that time for a rental reliever. If the Braves trade Vaughn Grissom for a rental reliever, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. Again, I don't think he's enough to headline a deal for Dylan Cease or Corbin Burns, but he's certainly somebody that you can use with other players. You package them with an Owen Murphy or a Spencer Schwellenbach, and you can get a solid player for that. Hopefully get a solid starting pitcher. So I'm just worried, like AJ said, that the Braves are just going to get rid of Vaughn Grissom because they feel like they need to. And I hope that is not the case, because I feel like there's still a good amount of value with Vaughn Grissom in the role that he could play. So again, I don't know what this spells for Vaughn Grissom going forward. It's not looking great. I'm interested to see what he looks like playing in the Puerto Rican League, playing some outfield. Hopefully there is a role here with him, and hopefully if they do trade him, that it is for something significant. All right, that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Wanted to just do a bonus episode here on the weekend, talk about this trade, talk about the Ohtani news. Thanks for those who were able to join me live or you're watching the replay. Appreciate all your support here at Locked On Braves. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit the thumbs up button on this video. Also, make sure wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, if you would, please give me a 5-star review on there and a good comment or two. We got some Phillies fans that went in there and gave some nasty comments during the postseason, so I need you to counteract those with some good comments and reviews. But however you support the show, I really, really do appreciate each and every one of you. Also, make sure you follow us on social media at LockedOn_Braves and at Shortstop Ball, and we will talk to you next time.